Thank you all for joining us. I'm Jen Perrin, a Climate Policy Fellow with the California China Climate Institute, and I'm delighted to be here with you all today. We're pleased to host this discussion on Shenzhen's decarbonization plans in collaboration with the Shenzhen Research Institute of High Quality Development and New Structure, a think tank housed at the Harbin Institute of Technology in Shenzhen, China. This session will focus on incentives and institutional policies being used to advance the city's decarbonization pathway, with a particular focus on the transportation sector. Before we get started, I'd like to offer a few quick housekeeping remarks. This event is being simultaneously translated into Mandarin Chinese. Please select the language you would like to listen in by selecting the globe icon at the base of your screen and selecting the appropriate language. This discussion is also being recorded and will later be available on the CCCI website and YouTube channels. Throughout our discussion today, if you would like to direct any questions to our panelists, please use the Q&A function at the base of your screen at any time, and we'll do our best to answer as many questions as we can live during this session. Now, I have the great pleasure of introducing our speakers for today. Professor Tong Ji is Professor of Economics and Management at the Harbin Institute of Technology in Shenzhen and is the former Deputy Mayor of Shenzhen. Professor Tong is also an adjunct professor at Chinese University of Hong Kong and at Nankai University. Professor Tong is a former member of the National Development Reform Commission's National Planning Committee and National Expert Committee on Climate Change. We also have today with us Professor Zheng Yuan, who is an assistant professor at the Harbin Institute of Technology in Shenzhen. He graduated from the Institutes of Science and Development at the Chinese Academy of Sciences and participated in study and exchange at the University of California, Los Angeles, and the Southern California Association of Governments. His main fields of studies are low carbon transportation and land use, energy economy, and low carbon policy analysis. We'll begin with you, Professor Tong, for an overview of Shenzhen's current carbon neutrality plans. Please take it away.
Can you see it?
Yes.
I gave the subject about the structural effective of Shenzhen's carbon emission peak. I rewrite this topic. I just think that Shenzhen, 10 years earlier than the whole China to be the carbon emission peak, so not the neutrality. So I wish to give the whole story about how about Shenzhen to change the structure and to reach the carbon emission peak. So can you hear the documents?
Yes, we can see them and we can hear you. Thank you.
Oh, okay, thank you. Since 2005, the carbon emission intensity of Shenzhen has shown a rapid downward trend. So we can see the right figure. So the carbon emission intensity declined very quickly from the 2005 to 2020. So about the compared with the 2005, the 2020 declined nearly 70% of the carbon emission intensity. Now, the carbon emission intensity compared with the whole China, just about 1/5, and compared with the whole Guangdong province, about the 1/3. But compared with the Toronto, maybe over 1.2 times and nearly 2 times to New York and to 3.6 times to Los Angeles. So we have a long way to go. This figure, left side is compared with the Chinese city, and the right side is the United States cities, Santiago, Boston, New York, and San Francisco. And here, Shenzhen about the per capita GDP is about 30,000 US dollars. And the carbon emission per capita about the 3 to 4 tons, lower than the New York, San Francisco, and Santiago and Boston, much lower than the Chinese cities. Now, Shenzhen 2020, Shenzhen's the per capita carbon emission lower than 3 tons or the 4 tons, just because based on the different standards about the lower than 3 tons measured by the production method, and nearly the 4 tons measured by the consumption method. So as the consumption method, Shenzhen's per capita carbon emission nearly 4 tons. But until now, the Shenzhen's per capita carbon emission is about the 40% to the whole China and the 1/5 to the United States. And the average of the global per capita carbon emission of the maybe 60%. Now we will come to the story, how Shenzhen got to the peak of the carbon emission. At first, we should say that Shenzhen has reached the stage of carbon emission peak platform from 2010 to 2020. Shenzhen's carbon emission increased by 16%. Compared with the 2010 and 2011 and 2016 to 2020, we divided this 10 years as the 2 period. We can see that at the first stage, the carbon emission increased very slowly, but in the second stage, the carbon emission fell by 1.1 million tons. So the whole 2 stages, the carbon emission just increased a little. From this left figure, we can see that the population growth contribute to carbon emission increase over 3 times, and GDP growth increase the carbon emissions 3 times, and industrial structure adjusting minus the carbon emission, and the energy structure change minus the carbon emission. So we use the LMDI to divide the 4 major facts. So from this table, we can see that in the whole 10 years, the population contribute to 3.4 times to carbon emission increase, and the economic growth contribute to another 3 times, but the upgrading contribute to minus 4.5 times, and the energy structure contribute to over 1 times. So at the period of the 2015 to 2020, we can see the upgrading contribute more, about 2 times, and the energy structure contributes about 80%. So in the whole period, the carbon emission, we think that carbon emission of Shenzhen near to the peak. And from the two period, we can see that the upgrading contribute more. So we can believe that in the next 5 years, next 10 years, the upgrading may be contribute more. So now we can see what the main measure to achieve the structural emission reductions in Shenzhen. So at first, we can see Shenzhen is entering the post-industrial and high-quality age. So from this figure, we can see the tertiary industries, the share increase from 32.7% to nearly about half in the 10 years. And the industrial second industry, the share of the second industry from the 43.6% to 35%. So at that time, the added value of the industrial sector increased 1.2 times, but the share of the carbon emission take on the whole city declined from 43.7% to the 33.6%, compared with the share of the added value, the carbon emission share to the whole city lower than the share of the added value. So we can see that the city's industrial production enter into the new phase to increase the high quality with the lower energy and the lower carbon emission to produce more products. This is about the manufacturing industry from the 37.4% to 32.1%. And the energy consumption share from the 43% to 31%. And the energy efficiency increased by about 1.2 times. So when we discuss this question with the hypothesis, the energy structure is fixed. So we can see the energy efficiency increased by industrial structure change. Now we give them detailed information. So we're promoting advanced manufacturing with a low energy consumption and a low emission. So at first, I should give some brief explain of this figure. This axis is about the share of the sector's added value, and the y-axis is the share of the energy each the sectors we get the lock. So we can see that at the right side and the left side means the difference, the energy efficiency. So the circle is very large, means that the share of this sector is higher than the other sectors. So the communication equipment, computer, and the other electronic devices production is the major or the leading sectors in Shenzhen. But we can see that is the share of added value is much higher than the energy consumption share. So we can, as we follow this line, we can see in Shenzhen, last 10 years, 1 decade, we adjusting the structure of the manufacturer as that if the ratio of the leading sectors output share to the energy consumption share is over 2 times, this sector will grow very quickly. And the lower may be declined, and then to move out from Shenzhen. So such as some high energy consumption and high pollution and high carbon emission. So this upgrading contribute more to China, to Shenzhen as the carbon emission peak to be reached. So the second thing is that local carbon energy structure. So the proportion of carbon emission in manufacturing sector declined faster than the proportion of the energy consumption. The carbon emission per unit of energy decreased significantly. One is to reduce the amount of primary energy burned. Small self-owned power plants of manufacturing enterprises were eliminated, and the generating hours of a large coal-fire plant was reduced. From 2010 to 2020, primary energy consumption, excluding transportation sector, decreased by 40.2%, driving carbon emission down by 41.5%. Substitute of the secondary energy increased by 41.46%. So we give some examples of the very famous companies such as Huawei. Huawei's added value increased 44%, but the carbon emission intensity declined over 30%. ZTE increased 55% of the growth rate, and the carbon emission intensity declined 40%. And BYD, the very famous new energy cars, energy vehicle productions in China, very same with Tesla. The growth rate about the 3%, and the carbon emission intensity declined for 14%. So we use the upgrading the technological structure, promotes the adjustment of energy and low carbon technology innovation. One is the widespread use of energy efficient technologies in manufacturing. Second, to adopt energy saving technologies and clean energy transformation, reduce the energy consumption by 25.7%, and the carbon emissions by 37% in the utility sector over the past decades. And third, finally, since 2007, new civil buildings have been carried out green standards fully, and new industrial plants since 2015, which significantly curbed the growth of electricity consumption in buildings. So last to the end, I will give some brief summary. The left figure is that the central government released the guideline about the implementing the new development concept to achieve the carbon peak and neutrality. So in this guideline, we can read that the peaking carbon emissions by 2030 is an essential manifestation of high quality economic development. What is the high quality? High quality in China means it requires to upgrade the industrial structure, technology structure, and energy structure to increase energy efficiency significantly. And the second point is that the peak of carbon emission is the plateau period of carbon emission peaking. Structural upgrading will not be smooth, and there may still be fluctuations in carbon emissions from year to year after peaking. So we shouldn't give the very solid target for the city or province 1 year target to be carbon emission peaking. And the third is that we think that it's very important that to be full attention on the issue carbon emission accounting of emission reduction responsibilities. Just before we start, I thought that in Shenzhen we have two methodologies. One is the production method, and the other is the consumption method. In China, is the very interesting and important that because some energy in inland China. So we should transport a lot of coals, oils from the western province to the eastern province. So we should give more attention on the production, the difference between the production methodology and the consumption methodology. Give higher pressure to the eastern province and cities to be lower carbon emission development. So that's all. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Professor Tong. Now we'll take a few moments to hear from Professor Zhang for a case study on transportation in Shenzhen. And after that, we will open it up to questions. So I see some questions starting to filter in. Please feel free to keep putting those questions in the Q&A. But Professor Zhang, the floor is yours.
Hello, I will share my screen. Okay, can you see it?
Yes, we can see your slides.
Okay, hello everyone. My presentation is about study on the promotion experience of vehicle electrification in Shenzhen. Maybe I will speak in Chinese so I can explain further. Okay. 大家好，我的演讲分为4个部分。第一部分是关于背景和国内外的经验，然后第2部分是关于这个深圳市推广新能源汽车的经验， 然后第三部分是问题，第四部分是关于这个未来电动化的情景分析。随着这个经济增长、城市化、工业化的发展，交通部门，尤其是这个道路交通部门，已经成为这个中国温室气排放增长最快的部门。深圳市最大的碳排放源，是这个目前是交通部门。根据我们的研究，深圳市交通部门碳排放占37.6%。Okay. Maybe I can change the channel so no English can be here. How to change the channel? Okay. Okay. Sorry. 然后我们继续看，在这个交通领域，中国及各个省市逐步完善实施了一系列的低碳政策的措施，比如说提高燃油经济性，乘用车的燃油经济性，然后优先推广公共交通，再就是第三个就是推广新能源汽车这些政策。右下角这个图我们可以看到，中国的新能源汽车在“十三五”期间快速的增长，从2016年大概91.3万增长到2021年的784万，这个翻了大概8到9倍。然后深圳市的交通部门的汽车的情况，左边这个图，蓝色是载客的汽车，然后灰色是货车。我们可以看到，从2014年开始吧，2015年以后，深圳市的汽车保有量的增速大幅的下降了。从这个主要原因就是深圳从2014年开始，小汽车的增量调控政策开始实施，就是这个限制小汽车增长的政策，然后汽车保有量增速大幅的减少，年均增速从这个2006到2014年的16.4%下降到2014年以后2%，与这个北京、天津、杭州等这些也同样限制小汽车购买的城市基本接近。然后我们看这个碳排放的情况，深圳市交通碳排放呈这个波动增长的趋势，在这个2011年和2018年出现了2次峰值。2018年以后，这个深圳交通碳排放下降的原因主要有3点：第一个是铁路的电气化不断的提升；第二个是这个道路运输业、新能源汽车，尤其是这个纯电动公交车、出租车、物流车的保有量大幅度增加。然后第三个是这个水上，就是航运的岸电使用率在不断的提高。然后左边这个图是深圳交通部门碳排放的情况，其中黄色是石油的产生的碳排放，灰色是天然气，占比很小，然后电力的间接碳排放占比在不断的增加。根据这个 IEA 的2021年全球电动汽车的展望，2020年中国的新能源汽车保有量全球第一，占这个全球的大概的1半，约有350万辆的纯电动汽车和100万辆的插电式混合动力汽车。然后我们简单总结了一些发达国家或者地区以及中国的一些中国的一些省市目前推广的新能源汽车的计划，就是未来这个电动车可能达到100%的计划。比如说日本，在2035年新销售的100%汽车为电动化，然后美国是到2030年零排放汽车占1半，50%。然后欧盟2050年成为首个碳中和的区域，英国准备2040年禁售传统的燃油车。中国目前还没有全国的这个禁售燃油车的计划，提出了这个2030年新能源汽车销售占40%到50%。然后中国的海南省 首次提出了这个，在全中国首次提出到2030年开始禁售传统的燃油车。深圳的电动汽车发展非常迅速，从2015到2020年，公交车数量增长了4倍，从4000辆增长到超过16000辆，而电动出租车的增长超过了10倍。然后2017年，深圳市的电动汽车、电动巴士，就是公交车的数量已经超过了纽约、洛杉矶、多伦多、芝加哥和整个新泽西州运营的巴士的总和。然后截止到这个20年底，深圳新能源汽车保有量为48万辆，占全市机动车保有量大概14%。深圳也是全球首个在这个公交包括出租车领域实现100%电动化的城市。下面2张图是我们搜集到的2009到2018年的深圳的电动汽车的结构，以及2020年深圳电动汽车的结构。我们可以看到这个2009到2018年私家车这个电动汽车的占比在逐渐的增加，其次是这个物流车。然后右边这张图也可以很明显的看到，这个私家车在2020年新能源汽车的占比超过了1半。然后我们介绍一下这个深圳是到底是如何推广新能源汽车的，就是推广新能源汽车的模式。首先是这个对汽车充电设施等的政策措施。深圳市的这个电动汽车的发展经历了3个阶段。试点阶段是2009到2012年，主要靠的是这个以地方财政支持为主，对这个购买和运营基础设施建设以及科研提供一些补贴，同时积极争取这个中央财政的补贴。然后这个第2阶段是2013到2015年，在这个阶段补贴增加，然后同时增加了一些非货币的激励措施，就是说在这个阶段，深圳市完善了财政支持体系，完善了充电设施网络建设，以及设定了各区的充电桩的建设的目标，就是比如说南山区、福田区等等各个区，在这个阶段设定了这个强制的充电桩建设的计划。然后在这个2016到2018年是规模发展阶段，在这个阶段补贴逐渐减少，然后非货币的激励措施进一步加强，就是说制定了这个电动车的充电的价格的优惠，以及这个电动车的牌照的优惠，以及停车优惠、路权优惠等等政策。然后在这个阶段，深圳市购买新能源汽车的话是没有这个配额限制的。然后其次，我们从这个公交和电动车的这个推广来，以这个公交和电动出租车的推广为例，来仔细看一下这个推广模式。在这个公交车的电动化的方面，首先是这个融资租赁，我们从这个图可以看到分3个部分。第一部分是融资租赁，就是说充电设施运营商与金融租赁机构合作，给这个公交企业提供纯电动公交车裸车的租赁服务，按这个不高于银行同期贷款利率进行分期付款。其次就是可以看到这个图的第2部分，动力电池由这个充电设施的运营商来购买，提供这个充电服务，然后充电服务费的形式，以充电服务费的形式收回它的投资成本。也就是说，我们这里的第2、第3点，车电分离，然后充为结合，这是公交车的推广模式。然后出租车方面呢，首先深圳市公交集团和这个比亚迪成立了一家新的电动出租车运营公司，叫鹏程。从这个图的中间这个格可以看到这个名字叫鹏程公司，然后承担了3项任务。这个公司购买和拥有电动出租车，然后将电动出租车出租给司机，以及给司机提供充电和维护的服务。然后这个制造商和鹏程 都获得了中央和深圳市政府的补贴，分别用于制造和购买这个电动出租车。然后出租车公司没有收取电动汽车的牌照费，由于这个电动车它没有燃油的费用，所以这个司机们，然后燃油费用要比这个电费高很多，所以司机们是被鼓励使用这个电动出租车，而且同时，如果这个乘客乘坐电动出租车的话，可以免交这个化石燃料的附加费，就是3块钱的化石燃料附加费。然后深圳还实施了一些，比如说10+1的政策，对于每10辆更新为电动出租车的燃油出租车，然后这个出租车公司会额外获得1辆电动出租车。OK，然后其他的车辆的方面，比如说私家车方面，深圳市主要从这个停车费方面给予优惠，并对新增的私家车没有这个配额的限制，就是居民可以没有不需要去摇号，也不需要去拍卖，直接购买这个新能源私家车。然后物流车的方面，深圳市给予通行优惠的同时，成立了这个新能源物流车的推广应用中心，就是给这个物流车的业主，营运物流车的人员提供一个信息服务。然后在这个充电设施方面，深圳市鼓励社会资本参与这个充电设施网络的建设，采取了这个 PPP 的模式，累计引进了超过28家的运营备案企业来运营这个充电设施。然后第3点的话，深圳市拥有这个突出的领导能力。深圳市坚持这个政府引导市场运作的原则，从多角度全方位助力新能源汽车的推广。举个例子来说，深圳市由这个发改委统筹制定规划，然后同这个生态局出台目标，生态环境局出台目标和规划文件，然后由这个补贴政策是由财政局来制定，推广实施细则由交通运输局来制定，住建局、住房和建设局、供电局负责这个充电设施的建设和运营，同时还有一些充电运营商的企业来参与这个充电设施、充电桩的运营。最后，这个深圳调动全社会的资本，由这个金融租赁机构和企业购买新能源汽车，提供给这个公交出租车的企业，进行租赁和使用服务，就是刚才讲的这个叫什么融资租赁。然后我们看一下深圳市新能源汽车推广，目前还存在一些问题。首先是这个氢燃料电池车的成本特别高，仅处于这个小规模的示范阶段。根据统计，就是2021年已经注册了800辆氢燃料电池的物流车，但是这800辆不在深圳使用，在这个佛山进行运营，因为佛山目前有一些加氢站。然后第2点是充电设施不足，就是说充电桩、充电站等等设施可能还暂时还满足不了所有电动车的需求。然后第3点是国产产品竞争力低，现在这个国产产品比亚迪竞争力在不断的提高。然后第4点是这个电池更换费用高。第5点是货车电动化的购置成本高，资金压力大。这里这个货车主要是指这个重型卡车，比如说泥头车，以及这个私人使用这个货车，它的电动化的成本相对于就是购置成本，相对于这个传统的柴油车，这个成本是高特别多。然后第6点是这个新能源汽车推广补贴和运营的模式值得在其他地方学习进行复制，但是由于在深圳市新能源汽车的补贴力度比较大，经济发达的城市可以学习复制这种模式，经济稍微落后一些，就是还处于这个发展中的城市，可能并不能完全复制这种模式。OK。然后我们根据以上的信息， 基于这个自下而上的碳排放核算模型，以2019年的数据为基准年，设定了2020到2050年的两个情景，一个是现有政策的情景，第二个是全面电动化的情景，来预测未来深圳市电动车的发展的情景分析。然后在这个下面是情景的设定，在现有政策情景下，我们设定乘用车、商用车的新能源汽车推广份额，按照这个目前的政策来进行推演，就是2025年的数据来自新能源汽车推广应用方案工作方案，2025年要达到100万辆。然后2025到2030年的情况的推广率参考节能与新能源汽车技术路线图2.0，然后2036年以后的情况，按照这个更新以及新增的重型货车中纯电动车型在2060年达到20%这个设定，这个是现有政策的情景。然后右边是这个全面电动化的情景，我们设置的比较激进，假设2030年起新增和更新的这个轻型货车 LDT 100%为纯电动的汽车，然后私家车从2035年起全部为新能源汽车，其中10%是这个 PHEV 插电式混动汽车。然后这个重型货车、大型客车的纯电动技术从这个2030年起开始飞跃发展，成本显著下降，到2050年新增及更新推广率分别达到70%、100%。另外30%的重型货车采用这个 LNG 作为补充。在以上的情景设定下，我们计算了深圳市未来2019到2050年机动车的碳排放的情况、碳排放的趋势。在这个现有政策情景下，我们可以看到，随着新能源汽车的大力推广，预计深圳市道路交通的碳排放在2022年可能达峰，然后随后到2050年逐渐下降，就是第一根线上面这根蓝线，相比2019年减少约35%。然后在这个全面电动化的情景下，我们设置了2种情况，第一种是电力排放因子维持在现有水平缓慢下降的情况，就是说在这个虚线2035年后受这个电力消耗的间接碳排放的影响，碳排放大幅增加的影响，然后碳排放下降速率从2035年以后开始减缓。如果这个电力排放因子随着可再生能源发展而大幅下降，就是这个实线的情况，2050年相比2019年也许会减少76%的碳排放，然后剩余的这个我们可以看到剩余的大概4万吨左右的碳排放，400万吨左右的碳排放，可以用这个碳汇啊，或者是 CCUS 等其他手段来进行中和。我们看一下成本，我们考虑这个机动车的增量投资成本，以及充电设施的建设和运营维护成本，机动车的运营维护成本，以及这个燃料消耗成本的变化。然后在这个不考虑电力排放因子变化的情况下，2020到2050年，我们这个深圳市全面电动化的边际减排成本呈现出先逐年下降，然后2031年以后产生这个边际减排效益的趋势，就是说这个2031年以后，收益就是使用电动车就电费的节约燃油的收益已经超过了这个它的分摊的成本。边际减排的成本下降原因就是随着新能源汽车大力推广产生的规模效应。然后因为这个可再生能源 CCUS 发展技术产生电力排放因子的下降，这个有可能导致未来这个技术投资成本的增加。然后这个 CCUS 等等这些技术，我们暂时这个研究里还没有考虑。根据我们的研究结果，也提了一些政策建议。第一点是继续鼓励购买使用新能源汽车，尤其是在这个私人汽车以及这个重货车方面，进行推广。然后第二点是借鉴这个加州的经验，鼓励车企生产销售纯电动汽车。然后第二点，比如说采用一些积分的模式，或者是鼓励奖励等等。 第3点是这个创新充换电的模式，我们建议推进光伏、储能、充电桩这种PV 加 EV 的模式，建设试点运营。然后第4点是优先发展电池回收利用和氢燃料电池车的核心技术。第5点是继续大力发展可再生能源，建议在这个深圳全域发展可再生能源上网，或者是与这个南方电网等等企业合作，研发这个降低电力排放因子的技术。OK， 然后我们提出了一些跟加州跟您合作的一些研究设想，一共大概有5点。第1点是这个未来深圳市大交通部门的碳排放的进一步的核算、详细核算以及减排措施的研究。这里大交通包含这个航空、水运以及道路交通。然后第2点是这个电动汽车电力排放核算的进一步研究。这里主要是指这个电力的排放电力的间接排放的核算的进一步研究。然后第3点是这个关于新能源汽车，包含电动汽车、插电式混动汽车以及这个氢燃料电池车，如何在深圳进一步推广的模式的研究，尤其是在这个私家车以及重型货车等领域如何推广。然后第4点是深圳市充电基础设施未来如何进一步的布局，全市布局。然后第5点是这个在新的国际形势下，比如说这个俄乌战争导致的这个油价的上升、原材料的短缺，我们这个电动汽车在中国或者在深圳市推广前景这个研究。OK， 好，谢谢大家。
Excellent. Thank you so much, Professor Zhang. We have a number of questions coming in, lots of audience engagement here, so that's excellent. If you have additional questions, please feel free to type them in the Q&A box at the base of your screen. Perhaps we will stay on transportation for a moment. So, Shenzhen has, almost completely electrified its bus fleet and almost completely electrified its taxi fleet. Professor Zhang, what insights could we draw from Shenzhen's experience that might be applicable to other regions like the state of California or other jurisdictions that are looking to electrify their vehicle fleets? What do you think are some of the factors that led to Shenzhen's success in this regard?
“能再简单解释一下这个问题吗？就是说这个私家车吗？”
What are some lessons from Shenzhen's experience in electrifying its bus and taxi fleet that could be applicable for California or other regions working on vehicle electrification?
好的。刚才这个讲的过程中，好像也讲了一些关于这个经验借鉴的模式。一个是这个深圳市在公交车和出租车的推广过程中，其实使用了大量的补贴，这个对这个经济比较好的城市是值得推广经验借鉴的。然后，但是对这个经济发展可能财政没有那么发达的城市，他们对这种模式可能是还是需要一定的其他的资金的支持，比如说去寻求一些企业的支持，社会资本的支持，对。好。
Thank you. Professor Tong, what are some of the lessons learned from Shenzhen that could be applicable to other provinces like Guangdong that may have a different industrial structure?
Professor, you're muted.
Open the mic. I think this question is that each city and each province with the different carbon emission standard. So Shenzhen is very lower than the average level of the China, but the other city can be the higher. But means that you can reduce the carbon emission levels. So not the same with Shenzhen. Can you understand me? Yeah, so Shenzhen is very lower than China. So because they have no higher energy consumption industries, but the other cities with these industries, but use the technology structure changing method, you can reduce the energy consumption of your sectors. So your carbon emission will be reduced. Not reduced to Shenzhen's level, just reduce, that's okay, I think. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We have
Thank you.
another question from the Nature Conservancy China office. They participated in a number of conservation projects in Shenzhen, like the Sponge City initiative. And they were asking for perspectives on climate adaptation and how adaptation strategies can help promote a resilient Bay region.
Yes. We worked with the TNC very well. From that year, I was the vice mayor, and later I was a professor. We cooperate with the TNC. So many thanks for TNC support Shenzhen to be a sustainable city. So I think we should give some details about Shenzhen's experience to the other cities. A lot of cities think Shenzhen is very special just because you have enough money. We no money, so we can reduce the carbon emission. We can reduce the energy consumption. We can adjusting the structure. I think no. If you can do something upgrading your structure, slowly, you can accumulate a lot of experience to be a sustainable growth, I think. So I think we can cooperate deeply further with the TNC to summarize Shenzhen's experience to the other cities and the other provinces. Okay.
Okay, thank you for
Okay,
that.
thank you.
And how about kind of recent events? So the events in Ukraine with the war, how is that beginning to impact electric vehicle markets? Are you seeing, perhaps this is for Professor Zhang, the impact on electrical vehicle markets, positive, negative effect, combined with rising oil prices, kind of how are you seeing that play out in Shenzhen?
好的，这个战争这些影响，就是新的国际形势的影响，其实不确定性还是很大的。我们可以看到在这个现在的这个情况下，油价涨得非常厉害，然后同时这个原材料也上升，就是电动汽车原材料，比如说锂电池等等的，价格也在大幅上升。这样的话，我们可以从这个市场上看到，电动汽车的价格今年应该是不太会下降，它可能甚至还会有上涨的可能。这个影响未来还需要这个进一步的研究，具体的研究，就到底它这个是减少了成本，降低了成本，还是说增加了成本？对，还需要进一步的研究。
Okay, and how about, a question for both of you? Shenzhen has a lot of, made a lot of progress, as we've heard today, but what are some areas where Shenzhen could continue to advance policies that would help strengthen its decarbonization curve? So are there additional steps that Shenzhen could be taking? Maybe both of you could answer that one to wrap us up.
周岩，你先说。
那我先说一下吧，就是说，根据我们的研究，这个深圳可能在新能源，尤其是这个分布式的光伏、分布式能源、光伏这些方面，比如建筑的，然后一些园区的，还有可能一些基础设施上面增加这个分布式的光伏，这样它这个新能源的发电可能减少一些碳排放，在这个然后再一个就是，深圳市也规划了这个领奥3期的核电这个项目。如果这个核电项目如果能尽快上马的话，也可以减少一定的碳排放。当然，核电这个安全性还需要评估。我不知道讲的还可不可以？唐老师继续补充一下。
I think that's a very good question and a very complex question. So in the future, we cannot give an answer when the technology changes very quickly. So, but I think that in the last decade, Shenzhen's mostly focus on upgrading. But now the upgrading should give more attention on the energy structure upgrading. Well, last decade, the energy structure in Shenzhen means that we used more South China grid electricity. We stopped the Shenzhen's lower and small generator plant and use the South China's grid electricity. So the energy structure changed. But in the future, we should give more attention on renewable energy in Shenzhen. So Professor Zeng gave some example about the solar and how about the wind. We should give more attention. And the other technology developed, we should give more attention. So I think in the future, we should develop the new energy industry in Shenzhen. Not just use the result of the technology progress. We should give more attention on the progress of the technology. So give more attention on the industry saving energy and the renewable energies developed in Shenzhen. So I think maybe we can find some more new renewable technologies in Shenzhen. And we should learn a lot from California. Thank you.
I think we both have a lot to learn from one another. Thank you, Professor Tang.
Thank you.
Professor
Thank
Zhang.
you. Thank you.
Really appreciate your remarks and participation. Thank you to the audience for all of the questions. Unfortunately, we're out of time for this evening, but we appreciate all of the insights and exchange for this event. This event has been recorded and will later be available on the California China Climate Institute website and YouTube channel. Thank you very, very much and have a good morning or evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.